Welcome back to the Impact 1 Million podcast. I'm your host, Shar Moore. Today I'm joined by the CEO of Goodwill Wines, David Laity. They have provided so many services to people over the years. They've served up 50,000 hot meals to asylum seekers. They've saved 12 whales and even 50 orangutans. But David, welcome to our show, and I'd love to if you could dive straight in and tell us, how did this start?
Thanks, Shar. It's really good to be here. It all, I guess, started with the Black Saturday bushfires, and I was impacted by those fires and lost what I owned and got a remarkable amount of help. So it was one of those events that brought all Australians together, and all that money that people put into tins, a lot of your listeners put into tins, on shop counters all over the country. I got a little piece of that. I got $15,000 of that. And so I was basically given the chance to begin again. And in doing that, I decided I wanted to pay back the help I received at that time. And so I began with the charities. I began an online wine business. I had some great contacts and thought, well, if I could give 50% of my profit to the charity of my customer's choice, let them choose who they want to receive the profit, maybe that was a good idea. And so, yeah, I kicked it off with the charities that helped me.
That's brilliant. And it's, it goes to show that sometimes when we see those tins, we go, oh, it's not going to make a difference, if I pop a few dollars in there. But actually, you're living proof that it did make the difference, not only to yourself at the time, but then it enabled you to think, well, how can I pay this forward? And so take us through Goodwill Wine. What's the model and what is the good that you're doing?
Okay, so Goodwill Wine is a certified social enterprise. There's perhaps 400 of us in Australia who go through the certification process. They're either businesses that employ people who face barriers to employment, or they're businesses who pass back 50% of their profit to charity. And so we are the latter. We're a business that gives 50% of our profit. And we do that by tapping into tiny little runs, the kind of wines that are available in quantities too small to be of interest to the big online wine players. And these wines sit in wine sheds in vineyards all over the country. And if we like the wine, we'll grab it. If the price is right, we'll then sell it or resell it, relabel it, and generally put it online for far less than that vineyard was selling it for. And in so doing, supporting about 300 charities. So we've constantly got new charities coming on board, and those charities let their supporters know that they can now purchase wine instead of from one of the big online retailers. They can purchase it through us. And yeah, and usually the first purchase is what I call a pity purchase. So you're not expecting the wine to be very good, but the wine turns up and turns out it is good, and so people return. And that's how the charities raise ongoing money.
Fantastic. I was reading some of the comments and you were right. Some people were like, oh, I didn't expect it to be that good when it turned up, but oh my goodness, it was amazing. And that seemed to be a common thread amongst the testimonies there. So, sometimes it does come back to that perception of it doesn't need to cost a lot of money for it to taste good. And I wonder, do you think in people's minds, because they know that half of their proceeds is going to something else, do you think psychologically it tastes better? Because they know when they're drinking it that it's actually, I'm doing this right now, so it's even got a nicer taste.
Yeah, look, I'd like to think that's the case. I'm not entirely sure that's the case. I think I still kind of go back to my pity purchase for people's first purchase. There's a lot of skepticism about charity wine, and so you're not expecting it to be good, but that first sip and the realization that, oh my goodness, this is every bit as good as anything that I'm purchasing, and in fact probably better than that case I got last week from that other business, or let's hope someone's not buying a case a week, but last month, then the realization dawns on them, and yes, I reckon it then starts to taste really good.
Yes, I can imagine. After a few glasses, anything tastes good probably. But no, I love that. And it's about those hidden gems of wines that you're finding in wineries all over Australia that, as you say, are too small a purchase for larger organisations. And that's where you can step in. But David, take us back to the moment. Like, how did you even come up with this concept? Were you sipping wine at the time and wondered how you could do good? Like, where did that initial moment and idea come from?
Oh, look, I was connected with kind of vineyards in the region that that I was living in, where Black Saturday, where the fires came through, and you know, at the time I was thinking about a few different products that could have advertising on them, and had in fact gotten some made overseas, and they just turned up, and I was kind of looking at doing the next step in that process of kind of let's start taking these out to businesses and showing what we're doing, and I guess kind of I flipped kind of after the fires. I decided, well, if I'm going to be sticking something on something, then I know a lot about wine. I've got some really good connections, and let's actually make it about charity, not about, you know, getting some international company richer than they already are. So
and making a difference in community.
Absolutely. So it just became I became obsessed with paying back the help that I got. I'd always had a background in volunteering. So I'm a volunteer firefighter, and prior to that, was heavily involved in community television and getting that started here in Australia. So I guess it's part of my DNA.
Yes.
But it was that single big event that kind of flipped the switch for me.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a massive event. And I remember it quite well. And, you know, it displaced a lot of people, and, you know, including yourself. So let's talk about the work that you do with the proceeds. So, you know, on the site, you've mentioned about your 50 orangutans and 12 whales and meals to asylum. So talk us about that and the work you're doing there.
Okay. So the impacts are really wide and varied, with so many charities that we're supporting. It's actually a lot of work in and of itself, just tracking down those impacts. And for the first few years, I didn't. I kind of thought, who am I to be going to these charities and asking them to, you know, justify what it is they're spending their money on? I thought, if it turns out that, you know, I can raise $500 for you and you spend that on your Christmas party for your volunteers, well, knock yourselves out.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do
Yes.
that. It wasn't until just a chance conversation with Sea Shepherd, actually, where we had raised a significant amount of money for them, and they volunteered what that money had gone towards, and it had actually gone towards diesel fuel, and I was a bit shocked, and at the time kind of disappointed. However, they went on to explain that diesel fuel had allowed the Steve Irwin to sit in the slipway of the Nishan Maru for 4 days, and in so doing had stopped all the whaling boats unloading their catch, and therefore going out and catching more. And so it had actually saved 12 whales over that 4 days of diesel fuel, which put everything into perspective. And I posted that, I think, as just a social media post on Facebook, saying, wow, guess what I just found out? And the response was fantastic. And so it led me to begin inquiring with the other charities, not policing them, but just I became incredibly curious as to, you know, what does this amount of money that I've just given your organization achieve?
Yes.
And I just became overwhelmed with what they're actually doing with this money. It's amazing. So
it humanises it, doesn't it? You know, we support a few different organisations, and Destiny Rescue being one of them. And, you know, for people to sort of go, well, it's $1,800 roughly in Australian dollars for a team of undercover people who have been working behind the scenes for years to go into places like Asia and into concrete rooms and work with these girls and rescue them out of the sex trade, right? And 1,800, yes, that's a substantial amount for a lot of people, but when you give a little bit each week, or you collect a few people together and put in $180 each, you've rescued a girl out of that life that she didn't ask for. And so that's something that I'm an ambassador for, and I use my platforms to raise awareness. But even we support some girls in India to go to school. They come from families, but the parents are making a couple of dollars a day. And so $60 a month sends her to school for a month, 3 meals a day, uniform, education, activities, and put some aside for her dowry so that her parents don't feel the need to marry her off as soon as she is able to at 12 or 13. And so it's those little things, and it's really great. We actually look at it from a perspective of, we've raised or donated this from our business, but look how many girls we've saved. And when you put it, when you humanize it like you've done by the meals that, 50,000 hot meals to asylum seekers, that's incredible.
Well, thank you. I'm a bit kind of amazed by what you've just told me. That's remarkable.
Yeah,
That's really remarkable.
Thank you.
Well done. And you're right. It is kind of, it doesn't take much to make a difference, to have an impact. And yeah, 50,000 hot meals for people seeking asylum, and 200,000 meals for people, Australians living in poverty. That's kind of one of the figures that makes me very happy.
Oh.
But also we've paid for 6 international animal cruelty investigations for Animals Australia, which is really wonderful.
You talk a lot about the state of giving, David. I'd love to dig further into that, because I don't know about you, but sometimes we'll talk to people, and when I do break down that this is what it costs to rescue a girl and so on, they go, wow, because they often look at the problem as, we all know that these big charities are working on global issues. And sometimes I wonder if everyday people like you and I, and not maybe you and I because we're doing it, but others go, it's such a big problem. Where do I start? How do I know that my little bit is going to help? But you talk a lot about the state of giving. So take us through that mindset.
Well, I guess there is a lot of mistrust in the charities, or in a lot of charities. And I know that, let's say, the Red Cross came under a lot of fire with well, it's probably the wrong word to use with the recent fires, but also in floods and so forth. And you see a lot of stuff on social media about what is happening with the money that I donated, and why didn't that go through straight away, and so forth. But I tell a story about 2 weeks prior to the Black Saturday fires, driving back from Malakuta and passing 2 houses that had just burnt down, and wondering what had happened to those people, and then having my place burned down and having all the help that I got, and still wondering, well, did those people miss out because they were 2 weeks too early with their house burning down? So firstly, I'd just like to illuminate for a lot of people that organizations like the Red Cross aren't spending all the money right away, because there are these houses in Malakuta, there are these places that flood, there are people outside of that immediate disaster who need help. And so whilst the media comes in and jumps all over it, makes whatever money they can from selling their newspapers and so forth and advertising, and even after the government has moved on to the next disaster, those charities are still there, doing what they can to help the people left over. As far as giving and the state of giving goes, I know that this year charity donations have dropped about 40%. And a lot of the charities are really suffering. I know the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre just went through a really hard time and managed to pull themselves out of it, which is great because they're an amazing organisation. And I know that people are starting to look elsewhere beyond just their donations, such as ethical purchases. But when you talk about the state of giving, do you mean like the mindset of people? And
how do you get into that state? How do you actually stop and go, there's other people out there, and surely there's something I could do to constantly be in this state of giving others? Because humanity, we're here to serve and to create true impact and reach the people we need to reach. It is about what we can do to serve and give. So I'd love to explain to people, how do you get into that state of giving, be it small or large?
Oh, gee. that's tough, because as a general rule, 51% of the population donate or volunteer or purchase ethically, but 49% of the population don't. Of that 49%, 80% think they do. And when pushed to give an example, can cite liking a post on Facebook. And so that's kind of,
my goodness,
the perception of giving for a large portion of the population. However, when there is a massive disaster, it ends up being 10% of the population who do nothing, and they're what kind of we refer to as the happily unethical. And then there is the other 90% who kind of step up, and a big portion of that are those people who are traditionally the likers on Facebook, and so they do put money into tins and they do things. And so maybe that state of giving needs something that really tests our humanity, and a disaster that is beyond our comprehension, which is tragic that might be the case.
I was just going to say, it's a shame that it takes something at that level to shift people to do that. If we all did a little bit more, and I asked the question of myself, yes, we're doing things. What else could we be doing? With our impact book, we're launching a global book in New York next year, bringing together 100 people around the world to share their thought leadership, to share this knowledge, this ideas around being in that state of giving, and putting that out there, and proceeds of that is going to Destiny Rescue. And that's our impact we can create. But I wonder if we all did a little bit more on a daily basis. One, we would be more prepared for things when they do happen on a grander scale, but two, maybe some of those things wouldn't turn into sort of pandemics, if you like, because we've supported that along the way, so it hasn't gotten to a place that it's escalated so big. What are your thoughts around that?
I think you're right. In order to the state of giving, the opposite of that is the state of taking, and I think the only way to really embrace a state of giving is to reject the state of taking. And the sad reality is that it's the pursuit of profit above all else that is the reason is the reason for many of the problems in this world, and it's the reason why so many charities need to exist in the first place. And so you don't have to be a business that gives 50% of your profit. Gee, you could be a business that gave 5% of your profit, and I'll tell you what, the mileage you're going to get from that, above and beyond just the personal good feels, is quite incredible if you can embrace that and use that as part of your business's story. If businesses were prepared to do that, then I think many of the charities that I support wouldn't even need to exist. As far as individuals go, I guess it seems to be businesses lead the way in a lot of stuff. We see that even in the global warming situation, where businesses are moving faster than governments, and people are beginning to look to them. I think it's a big personal journey for people to embrace a state of giving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't even need to be financial. It can just be volunteering, kind of.
Yeah,
A little bit of
time awareness. I don't have the capacity or skill set to be undercover in Asia and doing all. I don't, and it's not something that I'm geared for. But do I have a media brand? Do I have a voice? Do I have a platform that I can raise awareness? And can I contribute financially, and also by sometimes just sharing that is even a cause that needs support? That's what I can do. So I think each of us need to look a bit closer in. Let's not worry about what we can't do and can't fix. Let's just stay in the state of giving, as you call it, and just look at what we can do, and then just do that. David, I'd love to ask you, what does greenwashing mean?
Greenwashing is when a business uses, they're not really interested in actually having an impact. what they're interested in is having a good marketing story to tell people. And so, you know, you might be a massive multi-million-dollar business who does really nothing within that business to make the world a better place, but you buy some recycled plastic seats for out the front of the business, and then you put a sign up there behind the seats and say, you know, recycled as part of our commitment to blah blah blah, and but there's no real evidence within the rest of the business that you're actually doing anything. Well, that's just kind of like some sort of a marketing gimmick. And so greenwashing is a marketing gimmick, and people trying to jump on a bandwagon because they know individuals, the public, want more responsible business.
I see.
So that's how I see greenwashing, and I see it everywhere. I see it in ads on TV where you know, the business might say green a lot, and they might put a green tint over the entire footage, so much so that the people's teeth look green when you look at them in close up, and you can just see it. They're
trying too hard.
They're trying too hard. Yeah.
See through the green, people. Yeah, oh my goodness. Look, there's you know, I just think it's fantastic what you've created. You know, most people do enjoy a glass of wine, and you've been able to create a social enterprise around something that people often enjoy anyway, but then you've got this beautiful feel-good factor to it. And you know, you're out there, but I love that you've humanized where the money goes, how it's actually helping, because I think for people, like, that's what wowed me when I was looking through before I interviewed you, because you've numbered, you know, 12. I was just picturing 12 whales out in the ocean, and I'm like, oh, because someone had a glass of wine, those whales are still okay. And you know, it humanizes. I love animals, especially water animals and dolphins and things, and I thought it does. It actually shows that, you know, every little bit of difference that we can all make collectively, that's how we can impact 1 million and way beyond 1 million. And that's really what our show is about. It's having these conversations to start to think about what is the difference you can make. And you know, when you find your community. But I'd love to end the show, if I can, David, on how important it's been for you. And I'd imagine at some points in your journey, it's been quite critical having that right community around you. But talk to me about community and what it means to you.
Well, I've got a really unique set of customers, and certainly post fires, I lived in the little warehouse that I stored my wine for 4 years. So I wasn't meant to be there. I rolled out a swag, and because I had to be effectively the first to work and the last to leave, I never left. All I had to do was work, and it was depressing, and it was difficult. But the community, the people who were purchasing the wine, were amazing, and the feedback I was getting was just beautiful. And so I began writing to them, and you know, putting a note into every case. And I actually felt like I really began to get to know my customers, and I slowed down. I hit the 50,000th note that I had written, and it kind of stopped being sustainable. I still try to, when I can, pop in a little note, particularly, you know, for some of these longer term customers who've been with me for over a decade. But that for me has been an incredible community. It's really been amazing, and certainly during my darkest moments, rolling that swag out in this kind of really horrible kind of warehouse, it was all these little points of contact with people who kind of gave a damn about me and what I was trying to do, that kept me going. So for me, that's been an amazing community. Obviously, you know, there's a global community. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't feel like we have a responsibility to look after those who can't look after themselves, whether they're animals or people. And so, you know, there's a broader community that's on my radar. But to be perfectly frank, it's my customers and the relationships that we've developed that keep me going.
Yeah, that's so lovely. I think it's so important to find your people, find your tribe and community who also really truly embody your vision. But they're just people who get you, you don't need to show up as anyone else but yourself, and they embrace that and they encourage that. And it's so important, I think, in life to go and find your people, because you're not meant to be for everyone. And we had this chat before we jumped on, is that other people's opinions of us are none of our business, and it's really important that we stay true to who we are, because otherwise, if we dim our light so they feel better, no one wins. They don't get to see the full version and essence of us, and we certainly don't get to play all out. So I'm a big believer of that. But David, I know there's going to be people who want to go on and as you say, do a pity purchase. How can they track you down and purchase some of the Goodwill wine?
How can they, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, just well, we're online. So you'd be Googling, I guess, Goodwill Wine, or typing in www.goodwillwine.com.au. We only sell within Australia. Okay. It's just not economical to send a case of wine overseas. It often costs more than the case itself. And no matter what you do, they'll do their best to break it. So it's just Australia wide, but we do ship Australia wide. We've got a flat rate shipping, and it's a constantly changing selection of small batch boutique wines. Often award winners. So yeah, get amongst it, have a look.
Definitely. I'm going to be doing that as soon as we finish. David, thank you so much for joining us on the Impact 1 Million show today. It's been great chatting with you.
You're welcome, Shar. This has been a really nice chat. Thank you.
Thanks, David.